This is The Wire for 2300 Zulu, January 28th, 2025. Precedence is routine. Information cutoff is 2200. Bottom line up front. Deportation operations continue nationwide. Conflict widens in the DRC. White House states New Jersey drones were friendly forces. Beginning with international events, in the DRC, the situation regarding the rapid advance of M23 rebels has gone from bad to worse. Despite being located on the exact opposite side of the country and thus 1,000 miles away from the rebel advance in Goma, mass pandemonium and widespread looting was reported in the capital city of Kinshasa. Various media outlets have claimed that the embassies of the United Nations, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and even the United States were all either assaulted or overrun by rioters overnight. Analysts comment. As of this report, no statements have been made with regards to the status of the American diplomatic mission in the DRC. However, this afternoon, the U.S. Embassy in Kinshasa urged American citizens to either shelter in place or immediately evacuate the country, whichever option is possible for them. As is typical for the region, civil unrest can, and usually does, emerge without much warning, which presents logistical challenges. Right now, the usual extortionary roadblocks are being placed on most major roads, which makes travel difficult. As a reminder, there are two main airports in Kinshasa that are likely to be used for evacuation operations. The Ndolo Airport is located in the city center, but has a shorter runway, roughly 1,000 feet, which is only capable of hosting smaller aircraft or helicopters. The other, much larger airport, Njili Airport, is located east of the city. This airport, while larger, is a roughly 1 to 2 hour drive from the Kinshasa city center under ideal conditions, and has dubious perimeter security. Alternative evacuation plans can be carried out terrestrially, as Kinshasa sits on the border with the Republic of the Congo, which lies across the river to the north and hosts another international airport. However, there is no bridge between these nations, so highly unreliable ferry crossings are the only means of amphibious transport out of Kinshasa in the event that airports become overrun. On the home front, in New Jersey, during a press conference, the White House has stated that the recent drone scare that swept through the region was not activity from a malign actor, but research platforms that were authorized to fly by the FAA. No further comment was provided regarding who was operating these aerial platforms. Analysts comment. This statement will be interpreted in many ways. For one, if this statement is to be believed, this is more evidence in the pile that supports this whole scandal, largely involving testing being done at Picatinny Arsenal or by some other unknown clandestine government agency. This was always the most likely theory from the very beginning, but in the absence of any real data to analyze, any theory was just as good as the next. However, for those who personally do not believe this narrative, no piece of evidence is likely to alter their view. Throughout the United States, ICE raids began in New York City this morning, mostly focusing on well-known strongholds harboring illegals in the Bronx. Similar raids were conducted in Maryland. In Miami, local media reported that 40 illegals from China were arrested in Coral Gables this morning. During this morning's raids, at least one high-value individual was captured, who was allegedly a senior leader involved in the Tren de Aragua or TDA cells operating in Denver. Throughout Colorado, raids have intensified following renewed efforts to target TDA enclaves throughout the state. Sunday morning, a TDA-operated nightclub in Adams County was raided by federal and local authorities, resulting in the arrest of 49 people affiliated with the infamous Venezuelan gang. Analyst comments for this wire. Various opposition or protest movements are beginning to take form with regards to the federal deportation campaign. In addition to these protest actions, other efforts are being undertaken specifically to train illegal populations to oppose federal immigration authorities. For instance, several school teachers around the nation have taken to social media to share their plans for ICE raids taking place in schools. In short, many teachers plan to use their school's active shooter plans against ICE agents, barricading their classrooms in the event of a raid. Further efforts to solidify plans are taking form, such as intelligence collection efforts, community notification efforts, obstacle emplacement, the works. A classic low-effort example of such has arisen on TikTok and other social media platforms, whereby users will produce a short video about their quote-unquote cute winter boots, while splicing in tutorials on how to avoid ICE raids, thus the poorly coded language referring to ice occurring in the winter, thus the need for the boots. This poorly coded language is a mainstay of many groups, much like the in Minecraft verbiage used by other communities, and rarely results in any sort of plausible deniability defense actually working in court. Nevertheless, these half-hearted attempts at being sneaky continue, while also not really conveying any information that's actually helpful for those seeking to resist ICE. So far, most of these efforts appear to be largely uncoordinated, disorganized, and most importantly, not cartel-affiliated. Cartel operations to counter ICE are always vastly more sophisticated and in line with common insurgent doctrine, not some TikTok trend. However, in due time, the various politically leftist groups that are driving these operations will become more organized, though to what degree remains far less significant than the vastly more serious and complex operations that various cartel-affiliated groups bring to the table. Though no solid information on the raids has yet been provided by ICE, which is fairly common as they don't normally provide many details other than arrest numbers, most of the raids this morning appear to be largely symbolic and/or targeting individual people known to ICE for some time. Large-scale operations that result in the arrest of dozens, if not hundreds of illegals in one area alone has largely not come to fruition yet, probably due to the logistical challenges of such operations. However, one point of consideration must be that resistance to deportation operations is likely to also arise from within ICE itself, or more likely, local authorities' partnerships with ICE. One must remember, Trump has only been president for 8 days. All of the authorities who are currently arresting illegals right now were also employed under the Biden regime. Of course, the claim can be made that orders from the top prevented any real sort of investigation and/or deportation operations. This idea requires much more nuance to understand, as there are absolutely cases in which law enforcement agencies around the country have hidden behind the excuse of, "But the feds told us not to do our job," when in reality there was certainly much more they could have done over the past 4 years. Within the federal government, there is no excuse as common as, "My boss won't let me," when it comes to the reasons as to why someone did not do their job. Of course, general orders and national level policy comes from the leadership at the top, but anyone who's ever worked in government knows that there is always leeway at the mid to lower levels of bureaucracy that allow people to do good and wholesome work, despite a very oppressive top-down leadership style. Now that a political change has occurred, the American people have kept the receipts, and are now wondering about the exact details of why certain departments are suddenly able to do their job. What exactly was preventing them from policing before Trump took office? Was it a direct order to halt certain investigations, or was it agencies hiding their laziness behind a general policy? Once again, after every major political regime change, those who were serving under the previous regime will be questioned as to what they did during those times and how they carried on the best they could, despite the policies from the top. If arrests couldn't be made, what else was done? Were targeting packages created or intelligence networks developed? What investigative evidence was gathered, even without express internal permission to do so? If the orders from the top were indeed the biggest barrier to enforcing the law over the past 4 years, what work was done to tie up everything with a neat bow to present to a new administration? In some cases, this was exactly how it worked out, with many investigators coming forward with roughly 4 years of investigative work that wasn't able to be acted on. In others, many agencies are finding out that some investigators just sat on their hands for 4 years and didn't really make any attempt to do the best they could despite the circumstances. This will be an important observation to consider as deportation operations continue to ramp up. More broadly, it must be considered that there may be some resistance among LE groups who, after many years of stagnation, finally will be doing real work. For many, the chance to finally do good is appreciated, but others might not be so motivated. Others still are probably on the payroll of the cartels or are immigrants themselves, as many law enforcement jurisdictions around the U.S. allowed illegals to become badged law enforcement officers. How big of a problem this will become, or is right now, remains to be certain, but it is an idea that must be considered now, in the early stages of what is likely to be a large-scale deportation campaign. This concludes The Wire for 2300 Zulu, January 28, 2025.